Okay, we're at 6:01. I think we can start already, John.
So, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us. On behalf of the International Clinical Research Academy, I want to thank you all for joining us today for our next event, our next presentation in the Global Networking Series. I'm really looking forward to hearing from today's speaker, who I'm not going to introduce. I'll leave that up to our host, Ada Dale. But risk-based monitoring is a very hot topic, and I'm sure we're going to learn a lot from her insight, and I'm looking forward to that very much. So our school, the CRA School, or the International Clinical Research Academy, has a mandate to inform and educate people about clinical research and jobs, positions that are available in clinical research. Many people transfer into clinical research from other careers. If you're interested in doing that and transferring into clinical research, please get in touch with us. You can check us out on our website at cra-school.com, or please get in touch with me on LinkedIn. We call this the Global Networking Series. Networking is hard to do these days with COVID, so please get in touch with us on LinkedIn, and that's one way of reaching out and expanding our network. So just want to mention too that right now we have a special promotion for $8.99. We have our certificate course in clinical research professional, and it includes many videos and webinars on select topics. So with that said, I would like to hand this over to Hedda Dale, our host for tonight. Thanks very much.
Thank you, John, and hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's Global Networking Series. I'm Hedda Dale Salino, your host for tonight, a business administration trainee at CRA School of Montreal. So this is my first time as an event host for the Global Networking Series, and I'm really excited for tonight. Just a little housekeeping rules before we get started. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat box, and we will answer them as the time permits after the presentation, and to avoid the interruption during the webinar. And also, please make sure that your mic is in mute as well. I'm very honored to introduce our guest speaker for today's topic, risk-based monitoring during the pandemic. She is a senior clinical research associate since September 2019, a CRA mentor and trainer at MedPace. Our guest speaker is none other than Ms. Bahare Najjar.
Thank you so much, Hedda. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. So my name is Bahare Najjar. I'm a senior CRA at MedPace. Today, we'll be speaking about risk-based monitoring during the pandemic. As you've seen in the past year and a half, the world has shifted. Everything has turned upside down, and everybody's trying to adapt. So today I'm going to be talking about a little about how what procedures we took to cope with the current situation. So sorry, this is not working. There we go. So I'm going to start with a little bit about my background, like my education and my experience and how I got to where I am today. I'm gonna go ahead with a very brief description of clinical research. I was told that the audience tonight has a basic understanding of clinical research, so this will be a very quick slide. Then I'm going to explain a little bit about the role of a CRA in clinical research. So for you to be able to understand risk-based monitoring, you need to first understand what a CRA does and what monitoring actually is. And then we're going to dive into risk-based monitoring and some of the steps that we take currently with the current situation. And then at the end, if you decide to become a CRA and if you actually like the presentation, I will give you some tips and some skills that I think are required to in order for you to footstep in the to get your foot in the door for the CRA position. Okay. So I did my bachelor's degree in pharmaceutical sciences at the University of Montreal. This was a very brand new program. When I started, we were the first cohort of students to get into the program. So we basically had no idea what we were getting ourselves into. So it was very difficult to see what the job market would be looking like at the end of our degree. So what the program coordinators and managers did is that they organized some lunch and learns where they would invite professionals from different sectors of the pharmaceutical industry to speak to us about their experience and what they do in their daily life. So one day we had the pleasure of meeting a young lady who was a CRA, who was a clinical research associate, and she explained to us what she does. And right away, I turned to my friend and I told her I want to become a CRA. And that's when my journey started. That was the first year of bachelor's. Then at the end of my bachelor's, I did an internship at the clinical research unit of the Montreal Neurological Institute, or the Neuro that we call. During my internship, I demonstrated all my skills and my enthusiasm for this field. So right after the internship, I was hired as a clinical research coordinator. So I worked there for about 2 years. While I was working as a clinical research coordinator, I completed my master's degree. So I did a graduate certificate called DESS, so Diplôme d'études supérieures spécialisées in drug development, with the subcategory of clinical research. And so I used to work during the day, taking night classes. And then what's the beauty of this program is that once you finish it, you can do a project or an 8-month internship and convert that into a master's degree. So I did a project. I conducted an observational study on treatments of patients with multiple sclerosis. And then I got my master's degree. But even before I graduated from a master's degree, I got hired as a CRA at MedPace, which is a CRO. So for those of you who are not familiar with this acronym, it's a contract research organization. So the difference between a CRO and a pharmaceutical company is that a CRO does not have their own pipeline. They don't have their own molecules or medication. We sign contracts with the pharmaceutical companies to conduct some or all aspects of their studies. So this is my background. Moving on to clinical research. So as you may all know, or some of you, clinical research is basically studies that we conduct to determine the safety and efficacy of treatments intended for human use. So these could be either medications, it could be diagnostic products, or medical devices. There are different phases of clinical research. So we have a phase 1 to 4, which goes from healthy volunteers to post-marketing studies. And there's also we have interventional versus observational studies, which interventional studies are basically studies that we either provide a medication or a device, and there is something implicated in the study, versus the observational study is purely just data collection for analysis. So what is a CRA? So clinical research associate, study monitor, clinical monitor, these are all different names that are given to this role. So we are basically the link between the research site and the pharmaceutical company, which we call sponsors. So research sites are hospitals or clinics that agree to conduct the study for us. And our main responsibilities are to, first of all, assess the research site's qualification for the study conduct. So basically, we go visit the sites, we assess their facilities, their experience, their site staff availabilities, their patient population availability. And once they're selected, we conduct what we call a site initiation visit. So we train all the site staff on the protocol and the study product and procedures. So site staff are all the doctors, which we call investigators, or the nurses, research assistants, pharmacists, lab techs, basically anybody who will do anything for the study needs to be trained before doing anything. And the protocol, it contains the study objectives, the study design, the eligibility criteria, which are the inclusion and exclusion criteria that we need to review, and which determines whether a patient can or cannot participate in a study. And then once everybody's trained and once the site is ready to start recruiting, they are given the go, they start recruiting patients. And then us as a CRA, we conduct something that we call a routine monitoring visit. So basically we go, depending on the study, we go at different frequencies, could be monthly, could be seasonally. And we verify everything to ensure that the proper conduct of the study in an ethical manner while respecting the protocol, the regulatory guidelines, as well as good clinical practices. So whoever has any experience in clinical research knows what GCP is. And if you don't, and if you do want to go into clinical research, make sure that you understand the basics of GCP. So the golden rule of GCP, which is my favorite phrase, is that if it's not documented, it was not done. So it's very important in clinical research that everything that they do, they document it properly in their documents. So, and then once everybody completes the study and all the patients have finished the study, then we close the study at the site. So now I'm going to go specifically into ensuring the proper conduct of the study and how we do that. So once we go on site, when we visit the study sites or the research sites, we're there with all our documents in front of us and we're reviewing everything. It sounds very boring, but it's actually very fun because you travel a lot and you get to meet a lot of people and you get to learn a lot about different indications. So don't think that it's a boring job and you're probably just laughing at me right now, but it's a very, very interesting job. So you have all your documents in front of you and you need to review two types of documents that are very important. So you have the patient records and you have the regulatory documents. So the patient records could be all the medical records. It could be the research related documents. There's also any document pertaining to the study product. So we need to make sure that the patients are receiving the accurate number of pills or the accurate dose and not more, not less. Safety reporting, so reporting the adverse events and serious adverse events. For those of you who are not familiar with these terms, adverse events are basically any side effects that occurs during the study, and serious adverse events are side effects that result in either death or hospitalization or an important medical event. And we also do something called source data verification, which I will review in the next slide. In regards to regulatory documents, you need to make sure, as I said, you need to have, everybody needs to be trained, the training needs to be documented, and everybody needs to be properly delegated by the principal investigator, and that needs to be documented as well. So those are the kind of documents that we look for. There's also some documents regarding investigator's statement. So this is basically the investigator stating that he confirms and he agrees to conduct the study as per the protocol and guidelines. This could be FDA 1572 for American sites. It could be qualified investigator undertaking for Canadian sites. There's also financial disclosure forms that need to be completed by all the investigators. So these are some other documents. And before any study starts anywhere, first of all, we need an approval from the regulatory authority of that country. So here it's Health Canada, in US is FDA. Once we have that, then we have each site, they have either their own ethics committee or they use a central ethics committee that reviews the protocol, the informed consent, and all the documents related to the study to make sure that while the study is being conducted, the safety and health, well-being of the patient is being respected. So these are very important documents, and throughout the study, if there are any amendments, if there are any updates to those documents, they all need, depending on their importance, they all need either regulatory authority approval or ethics committee approval. So these are also some of the things that are being reviewed during a monitoring visit. Source data verification. So I need to clarify what a source document is. So basically, a source document is the document on which you write the data that you're collecting for the first time. So usually sites, what they do, they have their, they create their own worksheets specific to the study, and they have all the procedures listed, and they write down their data that they're collecting. So for example, if you're a nurse and you're collecting vital signs and you're wearing a glove and you don't have your sheet in front of you and you write it on your glove, well, guess what's the source document? It's the glove. So you need to keep that glove as a source, because in clinical research, you're not allowed to destroy any document. So just make sure that nothing is written on a napkin, on a sticky, or a glove. And there you have it. So once they collect these data and they put them on their source documents, then they have to enter this data into what we call an electronic data capture system. So this is basically a portal. They log in, they enter all the information that is required, and once it's saved, it's automatically available on the portal, and it can be reviewed by myself, by the CRO team, and the sponsor team. So this data is very, very important, because it's with this data that we will complete the analysis for the study. So our job as a CRA is to make sure that the correct data is entered. So what we do is that we have our source, we have our EDC system, and we verify. That's what we call source data verification. And it sounds very simple, but you have no idea how many times we have to go and, into the system, be like, well, we create something called a query and be like, well, this is not the correct data. And then they either put the wrong time, or there's a transcription error, or they put a data from another patient, which is the worst thing that you can do. So that's why it's very important to do source data verification, and that's why we go on site. So source, as I said, it could be medical records, it could be worksheets that the sites create. I have listed some examples here. So vital signs, as I mentioned, physical assessment reports, these are like lab reports, ECGs, imaging reports, and so on. Okay, now we're going into the actual topic of today's presentation. So risk-based monitoring. I need to mention that risk-based monitoring, it's not something new. It has been used in the past, but it has just been more and more used during the pandemic, just because we had such limited access to the sites and to the documents. So basically, risk-based monitoring is an adaptive approach to monitoring. It focuses on specific data with the highest potential to impact patient safety and data quality. So, for example, informed consent. The informed consent is the form that the patients sign at the beginning of the study before any procedure is completed. And we need to make sure, as a CRA and as this investigational site as well, that the patient is, first of all, capable of providing consent, that they are willing to participate and they willingly sign the informed consent, and that they don't have any questions or any concerns. So that's one thing that is very important for patient well-being. Then we have the safety reporting, the adverse events that I mentioned. This is also very important for patient safety, to make sure that everything is reported in a timely manner so that it could be followed up on. proper study product administration. We need to make sure that the patient is taking the appropriate amount of the medication, not more, not less. And critical data related to study points. So this is very important for data quality, obviously. So study endpoints is basically what we have in the protocol and what we're looking to obtain throughout the study. So for example, in a hypercholesterolemia study, we can have an efficacy endpoint of % change of cholesterol levels since baseline. So if that's one of our endpoints, it's very important to make sure that blood draws are being done at each visit, and that the lab analyzes the sample and gives and the report gives the cholesterol level in the lab reports. So, or for example, in most of oncology studies, one of the efficacy endpoints is overall survival. So we need to make sure that we follow the patients throughout the whole study, and even after they have discontinued, to make sure that we have enough data to say how long the patient has survived while on the study or after the study. So these are the main focus of a risk-based monitoring approach. Okay, so what happened? Well, you know what happened last year. I used to travel every week. I used to go on site at different sites every week, and when the pandemic hit, I didn't go on any site for about 4 or 5 months, and some sites for almost a year. So how did we do that? How did we review everything? Well, at the beginning we didn't. We were just, waiting to see what's going to happen and trying to figure different things out. So we had basically just phone visits or video conferences, which we called virtual monitoring visits. As you can imagine, we didn't have anything to review. So everything that we were verifying, it was just verbal confirmation, which was very difficult. And there was a backlog of all this data that needed to be reviewed and wasn't for months. So a virtual monitoring visit, it's basically a visit that is supposed to mimic activities performed on site to the extent possible, which, I just explained that it wasn't, there wasn't much that could be done. So after a few months, then sites started to adapt. The sponsors started to approve remote source data verification. And the only way we could do that is that we needed to receive the source documents from the sites. But you can imagine that if you have an oncology study of, 5 patients at a site, each patient has hundreds and hundreds of source documents. They obviously couldn't provide all that by email, or they couldn't scan all of these documents. So the best approach would be to provide a direct remote access to electronic medical records. Then again, not all sites had electronic medical records. So we had different processes. So we provided an encrypted portal to the sites where they could scan all these source documents and upload them to this portal. And the only person who had access to this portal was the site staff and the CRA of that specific site. We also had sites sending us documents via the file transfer systems like OneDrive or MoveIt. And there was also screen sharing, which is we were in a video conference and the coordinator would go on the electronic medical records, or they would show us scanned copies of the source. But you can imagine that doing all this, it was so time consuming for both the sites and the CRAs, because the sites had to scan everything, and the CRAs had to be able to read all the scans, and they also always had to go back for all the missing documents and everything that wasn't sent, and it was a big hassle. But we managed through it, and we still are. There are still some sites that are not allowing on-site monitoring and are still using one of these methods. We also have something called centralized monitoring. So centralized monitoring, it's not done by the CRAs, it's done by the team, the operations team. So it's basically consisting of conducting analyses of performance metrics and clinical data quality to define potential areas of concerns. So areas of concerns could be protocol deviations, could be potential misconduct at the clinical site, or data quality risks. So data are reviewed via statistical methods to define potential possible outliers. So as I mentioned earlier, we have the electronic data capture system where data is available to the team. So they extract that data, they analyze it, they find potential errors, and they provide that to the CRAs to review. So that really helps the CRA and guides them throughout their monitoring visits, because it'll give them an idea of what to specifically look for. And for example, protocol deviations. So protocol deviations are basically anything that deviates from what is specified in the protocol. For example, if there is monthly visits that are required by the protocol, and there is patient misses one visit, that visit not done, that's a protocol deviation. So for an oncology study of mine, what they do is that they provide us with an Excel sheet of all these potential protocol deviations for each patient, and they ask us to verify them to make sure, either to confirm if there are actually deviations, or to make sure that the database is corrected for that specific data point. And finally, centralized monitoring, it ensures consistency, adequacy, and quality of data. Pandemic in the CRA. So I personally was affected, and everybody else was as well. But these are the points that I picked up throughout the past year. So as I mentioned, virtual monitoring is not very efficient. We don't have all the documents that we need to get in order to conduct a proper monitoring visit. And even when you're on site, there are still restrictions. I have a site that literally picks you up from the reception, takes you to your room, and picks you up from the room, the monitoring room, and brings you back to the reception at the end of the day. So like, you're not allowed to move around the building. You're not allowed to go to the cafeteria. You can use the bathrooms, that's at least. And then in order for you to review this study product and documents, you have to go visit the pharmacy at the hospital, but then they don't allow you to go to the pharmacy, or they have very limited access, and they provide you with pictures of their inventory, which is not great. And then in a clinical site, there's always issues, there's always ongoing issues, and it's already difficult to be able to resolve issues visit after visit. And with virtual monitoring, or with visits where you don't even see the site staff when you're on site, because nobody comes in the monitoring room, they just give you a call, everybody's working from home. It's very difficult to resolve long-lasting issues, because it's much easier to be able to discuss with someone in person rather than over the phone or by email. It's also very difficult when you want to show them something. When you're on site, you want to show them something to explain to them, but they're not there. So they're like, oh, you know what, leave it, I'll take a look at it. CRAs, we're a very big fan of stickies, post-its. So we put post-its everywhere, and then you have a binder like full of stickies, colorful ones. And then when you come back, none of them were removed, which just means none of them were addressed. So again, very difficult to resolve issues. And the biggest challenge that I saw personally was that it limited my potential for relationship building. As a CRA, it's very, very important for you to be able to build a good relationship with your site staff, specifically the coordinators or the nurses that directly work on the study. Because first of all, you're their primary contact. They need to be able to feel comfortable enough to contact you if they have any questions or concerns. And believe me, there are so many, especially at the beginning of each study. I always receive calls and emails, sites panicking about everything, and all you have to tell them is keep calm and let the CRA handle it. So you have to have that with your sites. And also, you as a CRA will be requesting a lot of tasks from them. So resolve this, do this, send me that. So if you have a good relationship, it'll be so much easier for you to get what you want, rather than, you know, somebody who answers your email like 3 weeks later. So I find this very difficult, and I really like in-person interaction, and I like to see, you know, nonverbals, and we're literally masking our facial expressions during a pandemic because we can't see the person's facial expression when you're speaking to them or when you're discussing an issue. So that's one thing that that really hit me hard during this you know, these times. But we're getting there slowly. And if you actually are interested now, and if you do want to become a CRA, here are my tips. So first of all, as I said, very good or excellent interpersonal skills. It's very important that you would be able to not only build a relationship with your sites, but also with the team that you're working with. So you will work with the CRO team, you will work with the sponsor team. So it's very important to be also a team player. And you will be verifying every single detail of source, of regulatory documents, of everything. So you have to be very meticulous and detail oriented. So you have to have the eye for error and for detail. You need to be independent and autonomous. You are on your own. Don't be scared. It's not that scary. But you are the one responsible for your visits. You are the one responsible for scheduling and making sure that you have enough time on site to review everything that you need to do, and also to do everything else that a CRA needs to do. By the way, this is not only whatever I presented today, it's not the only tasks done by a CRA. There's a lot of other tasks that we do, but I due to time, I couldn't go through all of them. But so you have to be able to organize all that on your own. So it's very important to be independent, and you need to be a problem solver, because again, they will call you, they will panic, and you need to solve their problems. And some tips of how to get into the role. I would say experience and experience. I understand that it's difficult to get experience when nobody opens the door for you, but I would suggest, and I always say that to everybody who contacts me, try internships or volunteering. Once you do that, you not only show your enthusiasm and your skills, you learn a lot on the field, and you may even have a chance of getting hired if there's a position that becomes available. So try to find internships or volunteering positions in clinical research units or clinical sites at hospitals. Usually hospitals are easier than clinics, but there are so many, especially here in Montreal. I know so many of them that you could contact, and you could you know, ask them if they get any volunteers. I agree that currently with the pandemic, it might be a bit more difficult, but you have nothing to lose. Just call them, email them, do whatever you can. And one day, one person will finally answer. And in my experience, I found that it's easier to start with the hospital sector, then move into industry. I'm not saying that it's not possible to go directly to industry, but industry usually requires more experience. So if you start as an entry level at a hospital, as a research assistant, as a coordinator, it would be much easier to move up from there. And one secret tip: find yourself a mentor. I have had a few mentors throughout my career, and I'm so grateful for everything that they've done. And this is my way of, passing on the torch and giving back. So find yourself a mentor, ask your questions. They will be able to guide you through the right path, or hopefully they will. And once you're settled, once you're stable and you find your path, make sure that you do the same. Make sure that you give back as well, and you help others find their way. So that's all for me today. Question?
Okay. Wow, thank you, Bahare. That is really wonderful presentation, and I'm sure the audience have learned a lot from you and have a lot of questions. And now we will move to the Q&A. The first question is from Svet. This is for you, Bahare. Because with B Farm degree, you should be eligible also for the high level roles like project manager, study manager, operation manager, MSL, drug safety, medical writer, clinical scientist. So what are your career plans for the future?
That's a good question. I actually am thinking about management positions. The only concern that I have is that, I like traveling, and being a study manager, you don't travel as much. But since the pandemic hit and traveling has been very different from the past, I'm thinking to probably just go into clinical trial management. I was looking into MSL. That's a very good question. I would love to get some experience as an MSL as well. However, most of them require a PhD, and it's very difficult to get in with a master's degree. So.
Okay. Why is it
what
called?
What about drug safety? Sorry to interrupt you.
It's okay.
Now with the vaccine studies, there is a very big demand for drug safety advisors, because you have something like 40,000 participants, not 4,000. So there is a huge amount of data that needs stuff to be treated.
I actually I never thought about that before. That wasn't in my plan, but it's a good point. I could look into it as well.
Because I have seen maybe a month ago, Aerotech, they announced 50 drug safety advisor roles for Canada.
Oh,
50,
wow.
not 15, 50.
Wow. Yeah.
And this is the moment when Medicago started their vaccine trial.
Mm-hmm.
And I see plenty of new jobs, usually for coordinator roles. Today, I gave references for 2 students. Yesterday for another one, a few days ago for a 4th one. The companies are hiring like hell. There have never been so many jobs in this industry right now. Even if we don't see most of the jobs, they usually work by references. There is a lot of hiring ongoing. I see it by the request for confirming the credentials of the students that I get.
Mm-hmm.
And the other interesting thing is that it seems that certain roles are good starting points to get in the field.
Yeah.
I even see in the moment all the big companies, the big CROs, they announced onboarding programs. On my knowledge, the onboarding program is they train CRAs for maybe 6 months or more. They pay them a salary with the engagement to stay at least 2 years after that in the company, because
So that's very interesting that you mentioned that, because a lot of the
how to get there.
yeah, a lot of the companies don't have that. So a lot of them do require CRA experience before hiring CRAs, but MedPace is not like that. That's why I was saying that if you start in the hospital sector, you gather like a year or two of experience in clinical research. MedPace has an excellent training program. So exactly, you will be trained for between 3 to 6 months, depending on your capabilities, and then you're hired as a CRA from day one, and you're trained, and then you once you finish your training, you can start your CRA role. So it's a very good opportunity to be able to find such companies. I don't know of any other CROs that do that.
Well, I have seen lately Icon they recruit like hell all over the world.
Okay.
They joined with another company, I already forgot, with another big CRO, and they hire everywhere in the world new stuff all the time. But what you see in the job postings in LinkedIn, these are usually high-level management positions. You rarely see CRA level roles, and you never see entry-level roles. They don't have time for that. They don't publish it. It goes by references.
Yeah.
At the last networking meeting last month, Radia said that companies like PPD, for their training programs, they prefer internal staff, people who are already in entry-level positions in the CRO.
Okay.
That's why they don't really post these onboarding programs unless they start a very big study, and they will need a very big number of monitors, and it's clear that they will not have in the company that many entry-level staff. But this actually makes very important what you mentioned, that the mentors and the contacts are the door to get in, because they can guide you and they can tell.
Definitely, yeah.
I try to persuade our students to network. We're not accustomed to
And
do
it's
that.
working. Okay, we will proceed for the next question. So what will be your advice in an ongoing for 95% electronic data capture? What's its advantage? Is it an advantage or a disadvantage? From Mohammed.
Sorry, I'm trying to find the question in the chat.
And also about e-data, which EMR is usually used in clinical trials? Well, there are different platforms. For example, REDCap is an EDC that are commonly used in the university research. But Bahare, when you mentioned before that you also work in the CRO, what EDC are you using? What EMR?
EDC, there are different platforms. There is Metadata Rave that is very popular. There's Oracle that is very popular. And for EMR, there's Oasis that is used at the MHC. And there's Epic that is used at many hospitals as well. And then some other hospitals, they have their own little, their own platforms that are not as popular.
Okay. Thank you for that.
What was the question before? Sorry, I missed it.
What will be your advice in going for 95% electronic data capture? Its advantage and disadvantage.
Okay. That's very funny, because my internship project when I was at the Nora was in regards to electronic data capture versus paper data collection. So I'm completely pro electronic data capture, because it's much easier. It's direct access. There is less source data verification to be done. But then you will have less CRAs, so I will lose my job. No, I won't. But yeah, definitely. I think, and I think we're moving towards that as well. I mean, a lot of the hospitals that are using EMRs, they put everything, literally everything in their EMR. Everything is typed, everything is perfect. You can actually read doctor notes. So I think we're definitely going towards that.
Thank you. And I think we still have more time for 2 questions.
Sure.
Okay. Are there any instances that when the participants have signed consent and they have already been randomized before the labs have been analyzed? If so, what happens to the participants?
So that's a major protocol deviation.
Mhm.
If they are randomized, but there was the inclusion and exclusion criteria were not met or were not reviewed before randomization, that's definitely a protocol deviation. I had that happen actually yesterday for 2 of my patients, because they missed one lab. They missed the coagulation labs, and it was part of the inclusion criteria, and it was never done. The patient was randomized, they continued the study, and then when I went for my monitoring visit, or they send me the data, the documents to review, I noticed that coagulation was never done, and the patient could have potentially not even been eligible to for the study.
So it's like
they
automatic.
they usually just continue the study depending on how serious it is and depending on how much it affects their safety. They usually continue on the study, but we just report a protocol deviation to the sponsor and to the ethics committee.
Okay, thank you. And one more question from Svet. It's a CRA role is not an entry-level job. It requires at least 1 year hands-on experience. Internships are rare to non-existent due to confidentiality and professional liability concerns. What entry-level roles can be targeted to look for a first experience?
That's a great question. So usually I would suggest, again, hospital sector. So you could either look for research assistants, for clinical research coordinator positions, for startup specialists. In the industry, we have, and each company, they have their own titles. So that's why it's more and more difficult to find the entry level. So you have clinical trial assistants or project coordinators, or again, I'm trying to think if there are any other ones that I could find. These are the most important that I could think of right now.
How would you translate site intelligence specialist?
Oh,
What the hell is that?
that I actually don't know.
I think Bayer, or I don't know, one of the big companies, they have such a position. I didn't see any job descriptions. So strange. They invent
Site
different
intelligence.
names. Site intelligence. What happens with the different levels? In the past, there was junior CRA or CRA 1, then CRA 2. I think when you came first to speak with us, you were CRA 2, and some of the other speakers met you and saw that you are ready for a higher level and recommended you. And you got a job in MedPay, so I don't remember the story exactly, but we had several cases where speakers, in the past, we had 4 or 5 speakers from different companies. They see the other speaker, they see the competencies, they see the person, they say, but listen, we need somebody like him. And they recommend him because they can get a bonus if the person is hired.
Yeah, so it depends on some companies too, like they have their own definitions of the levels. So at MedPace, I think we have 1, 2, 3, and then it's senior, and then it's principal. something like that.
Yeah.
But,
But do you have, let's say, site manager? This is a bit of mystery. I ask every time this question, and I never get a clear answer. What is that? Because we have a bunch of students who started, let's say, as a coordinator in a hospital. They then jump in a study startup or study trial assistant in a CRO. And the second year, they're site manager. This is an $80,000 role.
wow.
Yeah. And I never understood what is that. Is this the new name of the CRA tool, or is this?
We don't have such a position at
You don't have
Medpace.
in MedPace.
We don't know, so I wouldn't know, but I could imagine that they do some part of a CRA role, like kind of a remote thing to manage their issues or concerns, but I'm not quite sure exactly what the job description looks like.
And I also had another question. Sorry that I take all the time, but I try to use all the opportunities. It's notorious that it's very difficult to talk to doctors. They're never available.
Definitely.
Now, how you do that in a context that you cannot move in the hospital, you're closed in a room, and you don't see anybody from the staff?
Yeah, so basically they give us a call. The
Do they?
doctors, yeah, well, it depends. It depends on the sites and it depends on the doctors themselves. So some sites, they really push the doctors to make sure that they come meet us or call us during the monitoring visit. And some doctors, they just don't care, and they're just like, oh, well, I don't have time for that thing. And like, I understand. So like, I don't push for every visit, but if I haven't talked to a doctor for like over 2 visits or 3 visits, then I really, I try to call him, I try to send him an email. Like, I don't like bugging them, but they answer much better to their own staff than they do to us as monitors. So I try to have their staff schedule something for me. So it hasn't been that bad. I mean, I've been doing this for 7 years, and I haven't had a doctor that really didn't want to see me at all during the study. I did have one doctor who knows me very well, and we've been working together for the past 7 years, and I actually did not see him from SIV to the closeout visit. It was a 6-month study. I never saw him for 6 months, but I knew he was there because I knew his staff, and I knew he was maintaining oversight. So I didn't bother to tell him to come see me, but it rarely happens. They usually are very cooperative.
Okay.
Sorry, just Heather, I will give you back the word, but when she says something, and I have immediately a new question. How do you modulate the frequency and the extent of monitoring visits depending of changes in the level of risks? Because we talk about risk-based monitoring. I took the liberty to answer this question. I'm not sure that my answer is complete. Basically, my understanding is that if there is a change of staff, new staff, non-experienced staff, if you have persistent deviations, things like that, or change of protocol, you may need to make additional visits and to change the monitoring plan. But I think that the risks are assessed from the beginning and assessed during the whole study. Can you elaborate a little bit of how this is done?
Of course. So yeah, we do have a risk management plan at the beginning of each study, and we have a monitoring plan which defines the frequency of monitoring. So depending on the study, it could be like, I don't know, like 4 to 8 weeks or 4 to 6 weeks. And the only time where we would have more frequent visits, it's really major issues. So even if the site is having, for example, a lot of patients recruited at the same time, and there's a lot of data to be reviewed, then we do that more frequently. Or if the site has a lot of issues that are long-standing and not being resolved, or if there's a database lock, So if we need to
Right,
get
yes,
everything,
okay,
we need to clean all the data, then definitely we go more often. But we don't go for, let's say if there's a new protocol, we just make sure that they are trained. We ask for the training documents to be sent by email. And then when we go on site, we train any other staff that wasn't trained, so.
But how does the fact that most of the work is done remotely now, how does that change the level of risks? Because
Well,
this is new, this is a new situation.
it is, and again, like it takes a lot of time to do the same job as you would do on site, and the issue is that especially there are some documents that they cannot send anyhow. For example, a consent form, because it has the patient's signature. So if they send me it, then they de-identify it. It's useless for me. So I have to be able to be on site to verify that. Or I discovered when I went on site that there was an SAE that wasn't reported because they wouldn't send us any source documents. And I went months after and I discovered that it was never reported. So it's a big risk. We try to adapt as much as we can, but there's only so much you could do.
So your take is that the companies will come back to physical monitoring to the extent of possible.
Oh yeah, definitely. We Medpace has been pushing for on-site visits as long as it's allowed by local government and the sites. Yeah. And I actually had to go to a site during a lockdown because the site did accept on-site monitoring. Okay. And I wasn't comfortable doing that because it was May. It was like literally like 2 months after the pandemic started. So we are still routing for on-site monitoring because it's definitely more effective and less risky.
Do they provide enough disinfectants like whiskey, vodka, things like that?
I wish.
Okay, so, well, thank you. I don't want to take all the time. There are other questions also. Heather, can you go ahead, please?
Okay. Is from home for risk-based monitoring, is it pre-planned at the beginning of the study or during or on the spot, the study period once identify some trends, not compliance for the protocol?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we do have a risk management plan at the beginning that is well defined. However, it's not set in stone, so it can be modified throughout the study if we discover any issues. So,
okay. Thank you. And would you be able to answer just the last question?
Sure.
Would RBM better suited for decentralized trials? From Toby.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Would RBM better suited for decentralized trials?
And what, can you clarify RBM?
Oh, sorry, the risk-based.
Oh, risk-based monitoring. I'm sorry, I was thinking about like something else. Oh, that's a good question. I don't know, Svet, could you?
Well, decentralized trials, this is a new tendency because the idea is not to bring patients anymore to the clinic, but to send nurses to the patients' homes in order to make the different tests. The evaluations are made by phone, video, whatever. The tendency is to use more and more wearables, different sensors that the patients wear with them that provide objective information all the time even. So there is no possibility to introduce errors because the data will go directly into the CRA, so to say, in the database of the company. But still, there the risk of the level of risk is very variable because it depends on plenty of different players. In every clinic, they will have their own procedures. They have staff with different level of competence. The reason why you stopped monitoring for several months was that there were no SOPs, no standard operation procedures,
Exactly.
how to do that in conditions of pandemic. The reason of that was that it never happened before. Nobody knew how to do it. And
Yeah.
every hospital had their own ideas. In some hospitals, it was nearly impossible to go there and to verify whatsoever.
Mhm.
Other hospitals were more intelligent and they have put in place different systems where it was more or less possible to do certain things, but again, not everything. And again, you're confined in a isolated room and you feel like in a prison. You cannot move to the hospital, etc., etc. In the decentralized trial, this is a process which is in development. It depends very much on implementation of technologies. We try to find a speaker on that for the next meetings to talk more about that, because this is also a hot and interesting topic, and few people know. I also have only some vague general ideas. I have listened to some presentations, but that's all. But yes, RBM is always there. Risk-based monitoring is a fact that you have to do all the time to adapt to all possible risks that can appear. The first thing that you do when you plan a study is to identify all the possible risks of errors, of deviations, of misunderstandings, etc., and to find measures that can reduce these risks. And of course, during the study, you discover new things that can happen in life, like people taking note on the gloves. I love this. It's true.
But it happens though. I've seen it.
It happens,
I've seen
yes.
it when I was working in the neuro. I've seen the nurses write on the gloves, and I'm like, listen,
Have you seen gloves in the binders? I don't think you have seen gloves in the binders, which means that they don't understand the issue.
Yeah.
So you have to retrain them. Okay, are there any questions, Heather?
It looks like that we've covered all our questions. So John, do you have anything else to add?
I just want to say thank you very much, Bahar, for that really great talk and sharing your valuable time with us. Thank you.
Thank you
And,
for inviting me.
Heda, thank you very much for being the host and helping to organize this. And I want to thank Maria too, who without her things wouldn't happen. So thank you, Maria.
Yes.
And please.
I'm
everyone-
sorry that I missed
Yeah.
another question, but I think that it's important because we have students all over the world. Is it possible to be employed from Africa when you have CRA experience from there?
Oh,
I think personally that for the CRA roles, not, because you need to be here and to be present to be able to make on-site visits. But by the way, there are a lot of remote jobs already, which are posted like remote jobs. My personal understanding is that companies are not ready and the laws are not ready to accept foreign staff when you don't have a work permit for this country.
Mhm.
If the company has a branch in the country where you are, you can be employed in this branch and there is no problem to work remotely. So this is my reading of the question. I just wanted to use the opportunity to give an answer. It's possible, but everything is question of networking. If you know people, they can tell you and they can show you different ways how you can do it. If you get in the field in your country, and if this is an international company, you can be transferred to the mother company. The mother company is in the United States or Canada, or to some of the branches of this company. Or if you go to Europe, they have branches there. So you can make an internal transfer, which will be much easier. Sorry to talk too much. I have logorrhea, I always admit it.
On the last note of networking, please reach out to us on LinkedIn, make connections, and we'll be happy to hear from you.
Thank you all.
Everyone.
Thanks
Thank you
very
very
much,
much.
everybody.
Bye.
Take care. Have a good evening, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Bahare.
Thank
Thank you.
you.